Hey there hunters, welcome back once again to the Gunners Guild. I think this is going to be the last Remnant 2 video until we get some more updates. So I'm going to crash the two builds I've completed into one video so I can just wrap this up. The two builds I want to cover today are the Bulwark build, which I know isn't anything special, everyone's got one these days, but I think I have a decent take on it. And then the last one is going to be a mod spam build that's hard to use, but it's still fun. Of course I'm not going to be using anything that's known to be bugged or not functioning properly, such as like Atom Splitter, Bore, Bottom Feeder, Dot Durations, Havoc Form, and a few other things just for other reasons. But let's just get into this. So I'm going to start with the Alchemist Challenger Bulky Boy build that I'm going to be calling Dad Bod. This is my attempt at making a build that will functionally face tank everything on Apocalypse while still trying to get the most damage out as possible. The highlights of the Gamer Dad build are as follows. It's got 165 HP, which is a whole lot of meat. 79.4% damage reduction, or basically DR capped. Still have medium rolls, 90% all damage, so you can kind of use anything you'd like with this, and the freedom to use basically whatever weapon you want. It's a skeleton of a build that does have a lot of room to adjust your playstyle. And I'm also going to state that the whole point of this build is to give players something to get them through Apocalypse with as little effort as possible, at least at a reasonable pace. And hopefully the build allows you to learn your dodging and positioning and enemy management at your own pace, and eventually start taking off some of the defensive layers for more offensive ones to speed up and improve your overall gameplay. And I'll start by covering the core of the build. Of course, we're going to be relying on the common set of rings and trinkets right now, which is the Atonement Fold for self-bleed, which is causing us to take damage constantly. And this allows us to use Heavy Metal Band, which is always going to give us 5 stacks of Bulwark, which is a great defensive tool. And we don't have to upkeep it at all, it's basically always active. With 5 stacks of Bulwark, we can also use the Dry Clade Ring for 15% all damage, which is really nice for a solid ring slot. And our last ring slot is going to be the Alchemy Stone for a fat chunk of free leech, since we're always under a status. For the necklace, we're going to be using the Effigy Pendant for 15% all damage, and 10% damage reduction because we're always going to be counted as having gray health, because each tick of the bleed causes us to lose a small piece of our health, and a portion of that is gray health. So obviously all the trinket slots are full, and this is the core of the entire build. But in the event that you want to strip away some of the defensive layers for more offensive ones, you can replace the Alchemy Stone with something offensive such as Xania's Malice or Probability Cord. You can also replace the Dry Clade Ring with something more for your build such as Archer's Crest, Berserker's Crest, Akari's Warband, or some Burden Ring. You're not going to lose a whole lot, I mean it's just some damage. Anyway, with the setup I had mentioned, we're sitting at 90% all damage, with just flat scaling, so no crits or anything, so of course this build isn't going to be a powerhouse by any means. But that doesn't mean it's weak. It has enough all damage to let you build it with pretty much any weapons or mods, which is nice. You can do some decent dot damage, you can do range damage, you have decent melee damage, and mod damage all at the same time. So use whatever you feel you're comfortable with. For me, I'm using this build with Pulse Rifle just because I don't use Pulse Rifle enough, though any ranged weapon works. I'm going to be pairing this with Corrosive Rounds and Fetid Wounds. While you can use Momentum for more damage, the extra dot is nice leech thanks to Alchemy Stone, plus we're also going to get 3 dots on the target, so we can get 15% crit from Fetid Wounds anyways. Our offhand is going to be the SMG with Hot Shot and Twisted Wounds for extra dots, so we can drop 3 more dots on a target. Again, this is going to help us leech the dot damage and keep us alive, but also it's nice since we're scaling just generic flat damage, all our dots are actually halfway decent. So you can actually remove one of your rings for the Fanatic Ring to get some more dot damage in, which is nice. I'm also using the World's Edge as my melee weapon, of course, it's my favorite weapon. Also because it clears trash faster than damn near anything else in this game. I've put Resentment on as the mutator to give us a flat 30% melee damage, because again we always have gray health. And there's stagger resistance, which is really nice, thanks to Atonement Fold. This is a great mutator to use in our pinch because it guarantees that you're going to be able to melt enemies in front of you, even if you're getting assaulted by like 4 or 5 guys at once. For the relic, I'm going to be using the Tranquil Heart just for passive regeneration, and I'm putting in the generic range damage fragments in them just to give us a boost to our shooting. And then wrapping all the way back around, we're going to talk about the archetypes. We're using Alchemists and Challengers for very specific reasons. First is that Alchemist is just good, and provides us all damage as well as Frenzy Dust, which is a great DPS boosting skill. It also allows us to get 4 concoctions, which will grant us more damage reduction and HP, letting us hit that 165 HP and 79% damage reduction. We're also then using Challenger not just because it's just a beast, but also it allows us to stack more armor to actually still be on medium weight. I hate being on heavy roll. And while you barely even have to roll with this setup, you still do, so I'd rather be on medium roll over a heavy roll. Challenger also has Rampage, which is great for DPS, and it provides us with stagger resistance, which is great for survivability, and of course Rampage will give us infinite ammo when we need it. The traits are going to be pretty much as you'd expect. It's all defensive traits here. This is one of the only builds I'm actually not using footwork, because you really don't have to have faster ADS speed. You can kind of just phase tank or spam dodge and you're going to be fine either way. So what is the selling point to this build and why should you play it? Well, again, this is dad gamer build, especially for console players and people who just don't want to go try hard sweaty. You can just take this to any boss, any encounter on Apocalypse, and face tank all the blows as long as you're still shooting. Just shoot, apply your dots, and eventually the enemies will die. You can tank, one true King Slams, you can tank Corruptor Beams, you can tank pretty much anything in this game. While the build is not immortal, the requirements to stay alive are pretty minor. Just keep shooting. Yes, you can still die if you're not damaging enemies and you're just getting hits, but this allows you an insane amount of comfort and leeway just due to its insane bulk. And that's pretty much the entire selling point. If you want to get through content and just get Apocalypse clears done, or just don't want to have to try hard, rock the dad bod. So now I'm going to move on and discuss the second build, which is a mod power build that I'm dubbing Spearlock. This build is going to be revolving around the Ring of Spears mod that was introduced in the DLC, and we're going to be trying to min-max the potential of this mod. Contrary to popular beliefs, it actually does pretty solid damage for a mod-based build at least, but it does come at huge downsides, which I'm going to discuss a bit later. So the way this mod works is that when you use it, you summon Ring of Spears that does damage to nearby enemies, pretty weak damage over time. This does scale with our residents, so you can make the ring really big. While the ring is active though, you can press the mod button to shoot a spear from your ring, and then you can also hold the mod button to recall all the spears you threw, damaging enemies that were nearby the spears where they landed, and nearby you when they return. The spears are not explosive though, so sad face. While I originally wrote off this mod because the largest chunk of damage you deal is centered on yourself when you recall the spears, which is clunky for dealing with bosses, I did find out that you can increase the return explosion with amplitude, making it a pretty decent range. So then I was sold and I wanted to build around this. So the main idea of this build is that we can increase our mod damage by increasing how fast we can throw the spears. This is one of the few mods where mod cast speed is actually helping us a lot, which is why I really like it. I love alternate ways to scale our damage. So we're going to be using all the mod cast speed we can get, which includes the Gesture Bell Amulet, the Kinetic Cycle Stone, and the Mod Duration Fragment. With Flash Caster, this gives us 125% increased mod cast speed, which is directly attributing to our damage. Ring of Spears can also weak spot damage, which is rare for a mod, so we don't want to use Burden of the Gambler here. So for the rest of our rings, we're going to be using Burden of the Follower to try to get back to our mod ASAP, and while I have Atonement Fold on for extra crit, you can use like Akari Warband for bosses, which is going to be more optimal, or something else that you feel, I don't know, pick something. While we can use Stone of Malevolence, our only forms of elemental damage is going to be from like our guns, and it's going to be not very often, so I don't know if it's worth it. For our archetypes though, we're going to have to use Archon because it is a mod build, but I'm also using Ritualist for now, but I think Challenger is more reliable. Ritualist just allows us to get some extra damage through the Deathwish skill, though the uptime is pretty poor. You can use whatever secondary archetype you want though, to be honest, and I prefer Challenger, but for the time being I'm using Ritualist. Moving on though, for the weapons, we're using the Sparkfire Shotgun to generate extra mod power through the Fire Dot and to recover our Ring of Spears faster, though Scattergun is still a fine alternative. So we're going to be pairing this with the Feedback Mutator so we can again try to generate more mod power because this thing costs a lot and we need a lot of mod power. And our handgun is going to be the Nebula with Harmonizer for Swarm mod to get some extra damage in while we throw spears. Relic Fragments, mod duration, mod cast speed, mod damage, mod. Now the traits, we need Amplitude for the spear explosions, and Kinship for Deathwish. Everything else, pretty standard. Health, Stamina, Iframe, Spirit, you get it. Alright, all the talk about explaining the gear out of the way, let's now talk about the overall output. Thankfully, the Ring of Spear builds can dish out pretty respectable damage for a mod power build. With weak spots, we can do about 3.5 to 4k DPS with skill and buff uptimes, which is not bad at all. This is definitely one of the stronger mod power builds, which is sad and scary to be honest, but it's not all sunshines and rainbows. While it will definitely tackle all the bosses and enemies in Apocalypse, there are some serious downsides to this build that you have to consider. First is that the spears are not hit scan, so trying to target enemies with spears and leading them can be difficult and you will miss a lot. Granted, the upside of that is that they still will come back and explode on you, so it doesn't matter that much. You're just going to lose out on some good initial damage. Next is the lock part of the build. Because we have to spam the mod cast as much as possible to keep our DPS up, we are unfortunately stuck in the mod cast animation for the majority of our uptime. This is really bad because mod casting and skill animations are some of the only things we cannot roll cancel out of, which makes this build and gameplay significantly more risky than just standard gunning, because gunning always has to be the best at everything. But if you can learn the playstyles, take it slow, and weave around attacks, you can make this build work on pretty much any boss, though it is going to be doing far less damage than expected just because you have to stop shooting and wait for your attacks to dodge. And that eats up a lot of the time, which again we're limited to because Ring of Spears is a duration mod. All that being said though, I still think it's one of the better mod-based builds out there when you can play it right. And it's unique enough in the way that it plays and its scaling that I actually enjoy it quite a bit. I do know that there is a bug where you can use this mod during Archon's Havoc form, but that is a confirmed bug, so I'm not going to be building around that because it will be fixed soon. It is funny though. All in all though, Spearlock is great. It's unique and it's a fun build, and I do recommend at least giving it a go. Maybe you can improve on it more than I could, maybe you're more comfortable with it. But yeah, that's going to be all for me, so thank you all for watching, and thank you to my Discord and community members. I appreciate you all, thanks for keeping me going. If anyone wants to talk shop about Remnant or gaming in general, feel free to join my Discord in the description below. But yeah, thanks and good luck out there, hunters.